Now that we have a good understanding of how we manage heifers compared to cows, let's start talking about reproductive technology and specifically estrus synchronization. So this figure here is a figure from Singer's book, and it is the cyclicity of a cow. And this is the most simple, straightforward graph that I can show you. And so what we have here is on the x-axis, we have the day of the cycle. Just to point out here, day 0 is always going to be really close to ovulation. Okay, and then on the y-axis, we have the relative hormone concentration. And so the two hormones that are pointed out here are progesterone, which is P4, and estradiol, which is E2. And so these are the two main sources or main hormones that play a big role in cyclicity. There's going to be other hormones that we can manage and that are a part of this process, but we're just going to start with progesterone and estradiol. So you can see progesterone actually will start out very, very high, up to about 6 days before before ovulation. And so when progesterone decreases, it does so because the uterus did not detect a pregnancy. And so when the uterus does not detect a pregnancy, interferon tau is actually not detected by the conceptus that would normally be in the uterus, and so that will trigger prostaglandin F2 alpha to be produced, and PGF2 alpha or prostaglandin F2 alpha will then go to the ovary and lyse the CL, and the CL is going to be the corpus luteum. And that corpus luteum's main job was to produce progesterone. So once it is lysed, we see progesterone decrease rapidly. And so this process here is called luteolysis. We're getting rid of the corpus luteum. So once progesterone decreases rapidly, that actually enables estradiol to increase rapidly. And when estradiol increases rapidly, this pushes that female from the luteal phase into the follicular phase. And so the female is going to be in the follicular phase for a little over 3 days usually. And during this time, estradiol is going to be very, very high. It is going to be secreted from a follicle on the ovary. And that estradiol is going to target not only the hypothalamus, which will trigger the pre-ovulatory LH surge to get ovulation to happen, but it is also going to target the uterus and the cervix and the vaginal tissue. And it's going to cause contractions to happen in the reproductive tract, and these contractions really aid in the transportation of sperm. And so they're really a key part of this process. Once estradiol has reached critical levels and been registered by the hypothalamus, which is producing increasing amounts of GnRH in response to estradiol, it's going to reach a threshold, and it's going to dump a bunch of GnRH into the system, which is then going to target the anterior pituitary gland, and the anterior pituitary is going to dump a lot of LH or luteinizing hormone and FSH into the system. And this big surge of LH actually will trigger ovulation. And so that's what we see here on about day 0. And so once ovulation happens, that egg or the oocyte on the female is going to then travel through the oviduct, where it's actually going to stay there and wait for fertilization to happen if it has the ability to happen. But from an endocrine standpoint, what's happening is once ovulation or once estradiol reaches the threshold, it's going to start to decrease rapidly. That rapid decrease is then going to allow progesterone to slowly start increasing. And so what's happening on the ovary is that where that follicle once was that has now been ovulated, that spot is going to turn into a corpus luteum. And it takes about 5 days to get a really good corpus luteum built. And once that corpus luteum is mature, it's going to produce large amounts of progesterone for a longer period of time. And so this is when we consider this female to be in the luteal phase. So she's in the luteal phase because the corpus luteum is the primary structure on the ovary. And then if pregnancy doesn't take place at about day 16, that conceptus is not going to be registered in the uterus. Prostaglandin F2 alpha is going to be produced. It's going to lyse the CL and start this whole cycle over again. With the reproductive goals in the cow-calf operation, what we hope happens is that clear back here when this female is in estrus, bull is going to breed her, or we're going to be able to artificially inseminate her. And while the system is in the luteal phase, we hope that the fertilization actually took place to create an embryo, and that this luteolysis process doesn't happen, but progesterone just gets carried out for about 285 days. It stays really, really high as that female is in gestation. And so this is just a really quick look at the luteal phase versus the follicular phase and the two dominant hormones in each one of these phases. And so this really sets the basis for how we can synchronize estrus. The whole goal of a synchronization protocol in beef cattle is to manipulate the lifespan of the corpus luteum. And if we can do that, we can also manipulate the growth of follicles and the timing of ovulation. And so we're going to use this chart as a management tool in an estrus synchronization program. So like we already explained, once ovulation happens, one way that we can actually manipulate this whole system is to make sure that we are not trying to kill a CL that won't respond. So after ovulation has happened and that follicle has ovulated and is turning into a corpus luteum, it's really, really small and it can't respond to prostaglandin F2 alpha. So that CL needs to get bigger. It needs to be about 5 days old so that it can respond to PGF2 alpha. And when that happens, that allows us one synchronization tool that is actually really pretty cost favorable and is a tool that we can use to synchronize estrus. So because this is the longest portion of the female's reproductive cycle, this gives us a larger amount of opportunities to manipulate the life of that CL. And so we can do so by giving an injection of PGF2 alpha at any time when progesterone is high. And that will start this process all over again. So she'll come into heat at the same come into heat within about 48 to 96 hours, somewhere in there. All right, so there's several ways that we can synchronize estrus. There's 3 main methods, either using gonadotropins, prostaglandins, or progestins. So gonadotropins, drug names are cisterellin and Fertigel. We use those on mature females. Prostaglandins are going to be drug names like estromate, luteolise, and prostamate. Those can only be used on females that are cycling, so they don't work very well in prepubertal heifers or anestrus cows. And then the third method is progestins. And so these are going to basically use progesterone or a synthetic progesterone as part of the synchronization process. So we see this occur with MGA, melangyl acetate, which is a feed additive that a lot of feedlots will add to the ration to suppress heat in lots of heifers, or we can use to control internal drug release, cedar, which we use at the beef unit pretty often. And so these methods really can only be used on prepubertal heifers or postpartum or anestrus females. And so with these different synchronization methods, I just want to go through and give you some overviews of this methodology. So with GnRH protocols, keep in mind GnRH is a naturally occurring hormone that stimulates the release of LH and FSH from the anterior pituitary, and that's going to stimulate follicular development. And so some of the protocols that use GnRH are select sync, OV-sync, and co-sync. Prostaglandins are really popular as far as a synchronization method. PGF2 alpha is a naturally occurring hormone that causes regression or lysing of the CL, and that lysing of the CL automatically decreases progesterone secretion, which results in that female returning to heat or estrus. So we can expect estrus to occur within 2 days following the injection, usually. And these protocols are going to be the PGF one-shot method and the PGF two-shot method, which we'll show you here in just a second. And finally, the progestin methods is going to be a form of progesterone that's going to extend the period of time progesterone is present in the system. And so these protocols include MGA plus prostaglandin and anything with a cedar in it. And so there's different protocols for heifers compared to cows. These have been heavily researched and developed by researchers. And so if you want to study this more in depth, it's really easy to find online, and I'll link to it as well. But there's a variety of protocols for heifers as well as protocols for cows. And so what your decision needs to be based on here is things like cost of the protocol, the labor intensity of it, and how many times the cows are going through the chute. All right, so that gives you an overview of estrus synchronization in a beef cow herd.